Folks, my guest this week started his career in Hollywood and even wrote an episode of Friends during his time there, but he is much more well known for his writing and creative talents in the world of professional wrestling, having worked with some of the top organizations, including, of course, the WWE, Ring of Honor, also Impact. He is now involved in a new venture along with his friend Billy Corgan. NWA's just launched Powerrr. David Lagana, welcome to Primetime. How are you?
Thank you, and I appreciate you getting all the extra R's in there, Sean. So it's
I worked on that because there's 3 there. So
you're a professional broadcaster, and it's it's been actually one of the greatest parts of my getting to do this. I've been doing this 19 years. Is literally have gotten to work or do something with everyone I hate, and I'm sure you don't want to hear this. Grew up watching, and the fact that we got to produce a pre-tape together for All In, and we can talk about that later. But it's really cool, and I'm happy for you. After how long of a break from wrestling that you're back involved and doing all that stuff. So
they never really let you go. It's like Godfather 3. Remember that?
Oh, trust me.
Just when I get out, they pull me back in, right?
Exactly. So,
did you you ever get a chance to work with Gene? Did you get to do some stuff with Gene?
I did some stuff with Gene at WWE. My favorite at WrestleMania 20 at Madison Square Garden. I produced with Bruce Pritchard. I think it was Bruce, a pre-tape with Gene and Bobby Heenan and May and Moolah where they were making out in a room in the bowels of Madison Square Garden, and my job on the pre-tape was to push the door as if they were humping against the door. And so, God. I mean, classic piece of television. And obviously you worked with Gene and Bobby, and I mean, here they are, obviously in the twilight of their career and still delivering such performances. And, so I was very happy to work with both of them. So
yeah, 2 of the funniest, humans I ever met in my life. And really I had the privilege of being a straight man for them now and then. And but we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about this new venture since we kind of led in with that. And I've gotten a chance to watch the first 2. Mm-hmm. Tell me about this. I mean, it's kind of a throwback, and why?
So
where did the concept?
Yeah, so after Billy and I's we either jettisoned Impact or they jettisoned us. It's up for debate on how that all went. But, we decided, we were talked about opening Billy Corgan Wrestling. Because, the naming of a wrestling company especially now, there's so many different names and, brand equity and value it's really hard to kind of, especially from scratch, start up something that, sits in people's minds. So when the opportunity came up to buy the NWA, it was, Billy is an old school wrestling fan. I am too. I started watching wrestling in 1985, and, the 605 World Championship Wrestling show was one of the first shows I ever watched. I'd watch Superstars on Saturday morning, and then Saturday night I'd watch World Championship Wrestling. And so as we evolved the brand and looked what to do, it's as much as it's a throwback, it's really just it's a format that works. And honestly, it's the same format as every other wrestling show. It's just the environment is so different. And with everybody else being in big arenas and trying to portray it one way, it's literally let's just try the opposite, but it also bounces off our history. And, the studio there's an homage to Memphis. There's an homage to Georgia Championship Wrestling. There's an homage to the TBS 605 NWA World Championship Wrestling show. There's a lot of little things that are familiar to people that are over 40 that maybe have watched it prior. I'm 44. I saw it when I was 10. And after 1989, I know the Memphis version continued on, I think, till 97. But the format still works because it's and I just said this in the other interview I did prior to yours. We're a lot closer to Saturday Night Live than we are Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
It's this, I hate to say performance art, but we're taking the genre of pro wrestling and those fans come in there knowing they're as much part of the show as the performers. So it's really a unique environment. So as much as it's a throwback, it's really, there's no excuses if you're a talent. Okay, you don't have music? Well, great. So everyone's at the same place. So when you walk out, you know exactly how over you are. You want a crowd reaction? It's got to be done from your work or your promo ability. And there's no sterile environment. And I'll use an example of what we talked about earlier. The pressure of cutting a promo in front of a live audience, the talents work off that. The day that you and I and Nick produced that pre-tape for All In, Nick looked at me like, you want to do it now? This is Sean's here. And you remember that, like the room, like the heaviest hitters in pro wrestling were in that room, from all of the Impact people, Kenny Omega, and you guys got it in one take. And it's funny because I tried to quiet everyone down and they didn't. But you and Nick, and Nick really commanded that room for everyone to listen to him talk. And it's a power to be able to cut a promo and get everyone captivated. And that's what this show is about.
Yeah, and people long for those days. I mean, the people that really were watching wrestling in the 70s and those in the early 80s, that was what wrestling was to them. There was these small studios, a very intimate crowd. There might be, God, in some places anywhere from 20 to 50 or something people. So you hear everything, and then there's this interaction, and it just it just takes people back. And yet you've captured it. I mean, just watching it, really, it took me back. Now, I didn't watch a lot of it when I was a kid, but I remember it very well. And I think that, like you said, all these others, it's all about the big arenas. It's all about, all these huge crowds, the pyro, the music. Mm-hmm. And this is pure. And I think that's what's really catching on to people.
Yeah, it's still but all the elements of what works in pro wrestling today still work in this environment. And the show, though, is not, when you go back and watch any of the old programming, I think you can appreciate the work that, Vince did with Superstars, because Superstars was such a upgrade in the genre, where a lot of the old studio shows, 30 to 50% was just dreck. Like Ron Garvin would go out and wrestle a guy for 12 minutes and just beat him up for 12 minutes. Like that cable was an afterthought, and you remember Superstars was the A show. Primetime wrestling was not what sold the tickets. That was, not many people had cable. More people probably saw Superstars. So the energy went into that show to make it as slick as possible. Primetime was good. But it was, old matches from, the Boston Garden or the Philadelphia Spectrum. But like this format that we do now, it moves at the pace that people watch TV. And one of the nicest compliments I got from a reporter was like, this is the first show that I didn't pick up my phone to go to find something else while it was on, because I put my foot down on the gas pedal and to really keep that format moving with every second of the show.
And is it the idea, because you mentioned Superstars, and I've done watch-alongs with some people and talked a lot about those days, because I was actively involved with the event center and all that. Mm-hmm. But Superstars was basically, when you stripped it down, it was a total promotional tool, and it was brilliant for what they did with it. You have your your superstars. You make sure you profile them. They go out there. Rarely do you see two superstars going at it. It would be these squash matches. We'd throw in some vignettes in there to profile the talent. And then they'd have me hawk the live events, which is what back then drove it. That's how the guys got paid. That was, they got paid by the gates. So the big, focus was get people to house shows. Is there some of that with this, with Power? Yeah. To do that exactly? I mean, what is the business plan with this?
So Billy, the comment Billy made prior to this, I think he said at the press conference, this is not a sustainable model, meaning spending what we spend per episode, and putting it on YouTube. The YouTube money, and I'll be transparent, the production is not being paid for right now on YouTube money alone. Right. But what has happened since we launched was the audience has grown so quickly that we're a lot closer to being sustainable than we were before we started. So it's really been, and there's a combination. So paying for this is ticket sales, merch, YouTube ad money, and then, like you said, selling tickets. So now our breaks will evolve. So if Nick Aldis is defending the NWA title he's wrestling in Minneapolis this weekend, so there's a ticket on sale in the show. we also could have put a ticket selling promo if either the promoter would want to purchase that as an ad. So like the business model of this show is to really be accessible for anyone. Like Sean Mooney can buy a commercial on the show if he wants to promote his podcast. Like as long as it fits the genre and we produce the content so it fits inside of our world, this show can be a marketing tool for anybody that wants to sell to this type of audience.
Yeah. But with YouTube and you know, folks, it's certainly not low numbers, but you're talking, I think, about 500,000 for, you know, these episodes. But on the grand scale, like you said, that's not going to pay the bills. I mean, you guys have, you know, very big talent. You've got everything that goes with it. Is it is there eventually to another platform, pay-per-views perhaps coming up? I mean,
the plan is simple. It's, you know, and as expensive as this show is, it's, probably 10 to 15 times cheaper than what, let's say, AEW's production costs. So our per episode number, I'll tell you off the air, it's a lot closer to what it is, and that's one of the reasons we went with this studio specifically, where we didn't need a production truck. It's all built in. Everything is in-house. We used a lot of their in-house people, which are a lot of Emmy Award winners. We didn't hire everybody who's done wrestling for the last 20 years. We went in a new direction. You know, the talents understand, like we have certain talents under exclusive deals. Other talents are working on, you know, exclusive for a cycle, maybe 2 cycles. You know, the economics of this are really unique because it shouldn't work. This should not work on any level. Putting a show for free on YouTube, but the reason it's working is, and it's really interesting. So a live episode, when we premiere it at 6:05 Eastern, the last all 3 weeks we've kind of peaked at about 12,000 live concurrent video viewers. But what's happening after that is within 12 to 15 hours, it's 120,000 viewers. So 10 times the people that watched it live are watching it on their schedule, and they're not. I was concerned that people will go, well, if I don't watch it live, it's whatever. But this is the speed that culture moves, and a platform like YouTube can do for me what CBS can't. So, for example, if you're not watching CBS or see an ad for CBS, you may not know about the show that's on CBS. With YouTube, it allows, if you watched 1 hour of AEW Dark, they might suggest, well, here's another show that's an hour that people like you are watching. Why don't you watch this? And in our first week, 35%, I think it was somewhere between 35 and 41% of the people that watched Power watched AEW Dark. Yeah. So, and that cost $0 of marketing thing because the platform allowed it. And so I think some version of this show will forever be for free on YouTube. And, you know, we have our ad breaks. After a live premiere, we put YouTube ad breaks. And the goal is to continue to grow the audience so it becomes a sustainable product, sort of like how, you know, back in the day, the guys who work Superstars, the enhancement talent made more. You know, they got paid more because the guys knew that being on Superstars helped their checks rise at the arenas. And we want to build very much a model like that where, you know, we have talents under exclusive deals, and now talents' prices are already up. They're in more demand off of 3 weeks of content that isn't even focused to sell tickets, but now everybody's energy is up in such a way that it's been really appreciated. And honestly, we've been floored. And, you know, to hearing from you and various other people in the business that it's something they didn't think was possible has really been for Billy, it's he is so happy with the results. And obviously we have a lot of work to do, but yeah, the goal is to, you know, these TVs will peak with a pay-per-view, and very much like the old traditional thing. So, you know, we hope to, with that pay-per-view, you know, get into the black for this season where all of these TVs lead up to it and where it'll pay for itself. Because, and you know this probably better than anybody, once you take somebody's money, you answer to their money. So, you know, the more we stay independent, the more freewheeling and control we will have over the brand.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you know, platforms like YouTube, you know, regardless of what you go on to or expand this to, it's the revenue stream that just keeps giving. And that's what's awesome about, you know, the way this has evolved, because as you mentioned, you put product up there. You've got people that immediately come on, maybe they see it live or whatever, and then they can just keep watching, and they go back and watch other episodes, and it just keeps going. And it's just awesome. There's so many different streams you can have now.
Yeah, and people will discover it. And, when I broke into Hollywood, I think I moved there in 1996. I had 2 internships. I worked in the NBC Primetime Series department as an intern, and I worked on Young and the Restless. And, the barrier of entry to make anything, and I think you could even go back to you even getting your job in the WWF or any job, you had to know somebody or find a way in. Now, anybody with a camera and a computer can create, and the barrier of entry to build an audience is 0. It's just creativity.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah, and it's crazy, and it's. I wish I would have been younger. Like if I was 20 now, man, I wouldn't go to college. I would be making films on YouTube because I learn everything from YouTube. It's to me, Billy and I wouldn't be here at the NWA without YouTube, and it's allowed us to create and run very lean. And, there's no standards and practices. There's nobody telling us, well, you can't do that on YouTube. Well, no, you can do really anything as long as it's not sort of excessive violence or, hate speech. Yeah. And, this show is like to watch people find it. And every morning at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. when my cat wakes me up, I get my coffee, and for an hour I read through all the feedback and I write back to people, and I'm just finding people are finding the show in unique ways. I found it on this message board. My friend tagged me in a tweet, and it's so organic, and I think it shows what is really possible, not only just for wrestling, for anybody that wants to do anything, that if you hit the right period, like you can get an audience.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about the talent too, because they need to be, in.
Oh yeah.
And, someone like Nick Aldis, who is one of my favorites now. I mean, I just love him, and the opportunities I've had to speak with him, and of course that opportunity to do, that interview. But he is a big star. I mean, he has opportunities, I'm sure, that he's had, from maybe some of these other organizations.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, he's in, and I know the other talent, but I'm not familiar, have been around them. And are they of the same, belief in what you guys are doing?
Yeah. So everybody that's on this show, and we made a documentary about sort of the making of, mm-hmm. and it's been cut up in pieces, and I'll send it to you if you haven't seen it. It's I said to everybody, you're all here for a reason. You were all either selected, have a relationship with us because. Very much like Moneyball, everybody that's here can execute in this format. We don't have a lot of 6-star pro wrestling guys. It's just not this format. And because the market is oversaturated between NXT and AEW and WWE, they're all doing sort of the same genre of wrestling. So we went with, and Eli Drake said it, and Nick said it. We went with men, like real men that. When I started watching wrestling, these were the type of men that were on television, and star looking talents, and also Eddie Kingston looks like a guy that you would see sitting at the end of the bar that you don't want to F with. And he comes through like
Tim Storm too. I wouldn't
Tim
mess
Storm,
with him.
Yeah. Everybody has a touch of something that's familiar. Tim Storm is one part Ron Garvin, one part Dusty Rhodes, one like nobody is a direct copy because they're all these individual selves, and they all know how to communicate, and it's a lost art. And I've had probably 1,000 wrestlers, and maybe that's hyperbole, maybe it's 500 reach out wanting to be on this show. And my number one question is, or what I say is we work off strong recommendations of talents that are on our show that would put their name on the line, saying this person's can't miss or this person deserves a chance. Yeah. And you have to be able to talk. And everybody on our show can communicate. And even Camille, saying no words, is able to communicate in a way that probably most women on television, wrestling television, aren't doing now. So it's everybody is in a unique position, and they're here for a reason.
Yeah, and I think that they're at least I know for sure with Nick that I'm sure he just adores the concept of it. He loves that old school. I remember we had a conversation talking about, he just loved having, directions in the ring from the ref, it's just, and you create this genuine, sporting event. I mean, it really has that feel to it. And, really, I've just enjoyed what I've seen so far. It's just been great.
Well, and that's, we're really happy with the people's reactions to it, and it's still, even if you didn't grow up with it, and it was a risk because, everyone's like, oh, it's just a nostalgia or a ripoff, or it's leaning too heavy on nostalgia. No, we had like, besides Cornette, there's not a lot of old legends on this show. It's not, we didn't bring out Sergeant Slaughter and, Ricky Steamboat and the show full of legends. They at times, those people will pop up, but this is very much this group of guys and women that all have something to prove in a market where a lot of them were told, you don't fit in anymore. You're not the guys that get the certain number of stars. Well, we're proving that just like music and just like movies, there are different subgenres inside of a bigger genre that speak to different audiences. And I think we've designed this show to be something that is acceptable and speaks to an audience that is not being served.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to see where you guys go with this. But I also want to talk about your journey, Dave. And I think you're, in a lot of ways, I mean, we are from different generations, but I think you kind of grew up in a lot of the ways that I did. I mean, I was just crazy about entertainment when I was growing up. I loved watching television shows. I loved sitcoms. And, when you talk about your journey to Hollywood, you kind of start when you were 20, but what was it like for you growing up? Were you, just fascinated with television, and how did writing start for you? And what was it that got you on that path?
So I'm a child of the 80s, which there was, I had a computer like I think I had an Apple IIc in like 83 or 84, but like, I grew up with cable television. And so then I had HBO, I had movies. So, you either went outside and played, which I did, but a lot of time was watching television. And it was always fascinating to me. And I don't know if I've ever told this story as in a wrestling context, but when I was 13 years old, my parents and I, we did this like 3-week ridiculous. It was like part of my dad's work trip. We went to Hawaii as like a bonus that he got, but then we had like these 3 off days in LA before we flew back. So we went to see a taping of Family Matters, the Urkel show.
Okay.
So the security guard screwed up. He was supposed to have us go right and sit on this bench to wait to go to the show. He goes, there you go. It's stage 16. We're like, okay. So we just start wandering the Sony lot in Los Angeles. And at the time, they're shooting the movie Hook, which had Julia Roberts, Dustin Hoffman, Robin Williams, Steven Spielberg directed it. And so here's this ridiculous, most American family wandering around this Hollywood backlot. And we walk by and my dad goes, that's Robin Williams. I said, what? And I look to the left. There's Robin Williams talking to Dustin Hoffman, and there's Spielberg. And I'm just like, and I'm a huge film fan. And we just look at it, and then we walk to the stage, and over to the right, getting out of her trailer, is Julia Roberts, who at the time had just broken up with Keith or Sutherland, maybe, and was dating Jason Patrick. And I'm just like, this is what I want to do. Like,
it must have been surreal, though.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, and then so like the sound stages were open so we could see the sets, and I was just fascinated by it. And from that day, like I remember going, I don't know if I was a freshman or a sophomore at like the college. I ended up going to Emerson College, which is a huge TV school. Jay Leno went there, Dennis Leary, Seth Grahame-Smith, who he wrote Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. He does a lot of big movies. It was like a really good television school. And so for me, I grew up watching TV. I didn't want to be a fireman. I didn't want to be anything. I almost was a geometry teacher. So thank God I didn't go down that road. But it was either geometry or writing. And I always loved wrestling.
Let me think about that one.
Yeah. I remember the book was wrong once. My geometry book in sophomore year was wrong. And I found something that was wrong in the book. And I went to my professor and I was like, this is wrong. I said, I'd done it 3 times. The book's wrong. And the book was wrong. And I was just like, I think I've peaked in geometry. So that was all what I wanted. But, I always loved wrestling. And I remember being 10 years old, and I knew I did not have the athletic acumen to be a pro wrestler, but I knew that the show was produced. And so I always wanted to do that. So, to go to Hollywood, had some nice success. But when I was in Hollywood, it was sort of the last gasp of the sitcom era. Being like, I got real lucky. I got my job on Friends because I could type fast. Like literally, that's how I got my job. They needed someone who could type over 80 words a minute. And at the time, 2 days before I had my meeting, I was at 65. I literally spent 2 days working on my typing skills that I got clocked at 102 words a minute.
Jeez.
And that's how I got my job, because they wanted somebody who could type fast. And
cruised in there, huh?
Yeah, it was.
We got a ringer.
Yeah, well, he's like, do you work in like legal? I was like, no, I just can type fast because I've been using a computer since 1984. Yeah, so it's funny how things work. But I worked on Jason Alexander had a sitcom called Bob Patterson. It was his first sitcom after Seinfeld, and I learned a real lesson with that thing. Like, we had no idea if the show was good. We had no idea if the audiences would like it. And then it aired and no one liked it. Like, it didn't hit with audiences, and we put all this work into it. And I'm like, this is hard. Like you have no idea. You don't know for months later if something's going to work or not. And so when the opportunity to work at WWE came up, because I was obviously a big fan and kept applying, and when it came up, I was like, wait, I can tell a talent what to say and they'll say it on TV 3 minutes later? That is such a completely different environment.
Reaction.
Yeah.
But did you write before this? I mean, when you came in, were you like, I want to be a writer, or just I want to get into entertainment? Because my big plan when I got out of school, I was going to go to L.A. and try and become a page, I mean, but things went the other way. I went to the East Coast.
Yeah, so for me, like, I picked up a video camera literally after that trip to L.A., and I started – I didn't like writing papers. So literally everything in high school were videos. So, so I would make videos for my Italian class instead of writing a paper. And it's just I started making videos. But when I got to college, I found writing to be and you have to remember, in 1995, 6, 7, there wasn't an iPhone. You had to like the barrier of entry to make content or whatever it was expensive. You had to rent a camera. It was real difficult. So writing to me was a little bit easier. So now to come full circle now and be able to do it all, and literally our whole company is my backpack. Got the camera that I shot you on, like it's all right there. And the fact that I shot that interview and they had it, it was on the show, 20 minutes later, it shows what's really possible.
Yeah, that's incredible. So Hollywood, I guess, was a good training ground. I mean, it probably prepared you to work with the WWE. To really handle insaneness. But like you said, you just kept applying and applying and applying, and finally they said, all right, we'll give you a look.
Yeah, it sure didn't hurt to have a credit with friends. It's like, I remember meeting Stephanie, and she's like, and at the time they had kind of burnt out on Hollywood writers. And I remember, a couple of famous stand-ups had been there, and, I had to kind of earn my stripes at the time. And, I got kind of linked up with Paul Heyman very quickly there, and I learned under him, and then worked with Bruce, and I was on the plane, and like I say this in jest now, but I would have paid to have that opportunity to learn from Vince. And obviously you spent probably more time with Vince. Like, he is so, as much as people think he's out of touch, he is so in touch with understanding a lot of human emotion that I think at times he gets bored with it, because he's been executing the same type of genre for so long that it's almost instinctual for him. But to have the business lesson to work for a legit billionaire who made it himself, is people would pay high dollar to have that type of education on a daily basis.
Yeah, and people talk about Vince, and you spent a lot of years. I mean, you went back and forth with the guy at some point, I'm sure. And I remember when I left, and people would always try and get me to do interviews where they wanted me to trash him. That was and I just would never do them. I just I have no reason to. I mean, the guy gave me a career, basically. Yeah. But one of the points about him was, and especially back then, Dave, because, we're talking mid-'80s. I joined in '87, and it was still like a family company. I mean, we had everybody knew everybody. I knew people in corporate, Basil DeVito and, Dick Glover and all everybody knew each other, especially the production part of it. Kevin Dunn was the producer in Edit 1. We had Edit 1 and Edit 2, and that's where they did the event center. I mean, it was, but the thing about Vince was back then he was able to have that interaction. And there were times when, like when I got there, I had no business being on the air, really. I was nowhere near a polished, broadcaster. And there were times when he would just take time and wouldn't pressure me, which he could have, ripped my head off. And I tell the story. There was one time, I think it was a pay-per-view, and I was supposed to do this promo inside the cage to talk about this cage match, and I could not get that. And the pressure was mounting because we're getting close. And I know there's 50 eyes up there. They're want me to get this damn thing done. And Vince took his headset off, and it was pretty far away. He walked all the way down to ringside where this thing was, and he says, "Come over here, pal." And he just says, "You got this." He goes, "I just say this, this, and this. Get up there and go do it." And he sat there, and I nailed it. And I never forgot that because he didn't have to do that. And he, like I said, he could have just ripped my head off and said, "Get somebody else in there to get Okerlund or something." But back at that time, he could, really, and I know there's other moments even now that he does that. But people see that don't get to see that side of him. And mostly what people talk about is the horrible things. But I'm sure that you probably have a bunch of stories like that besides the bad. But there was a lot, there's a lot of good to him, and he gave me a lot of great traits that have carried through my career.
Yeah, there's no human. The only person I've seen work as hard as Vince is Billy Corgan. Meaning like Vince. Like, it's not like he's often, and I've worked for various different people at various different levels, and, he's committed to that business. He can do whatever he wants with it. And guess what? As an audience, you can decide to watch it or not. And, it's weird. I feel like at times some fans feel hostage to them. Like, if they don't like it, then stop watching it. Like the show Empire, I loved the first 7 episodes. And then it sort of jumped the shark when they realized they had a hit on their hand, because the contrivance of Empire was that the lead character was dying and was going to die within a year. So I think they didn't think the show was going to be successful, so that the hook. But you can tell.
Now what do we do?
Yeah, but now they figured out, oh crap, the show's going to be successful. So I remember when they pulled out of he got cured, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm done. Okay, I get why they're doing it, but I started to not like the show. Guess what I did? I stopped watching it. I didn't go on message boards and just be like it didn't appeal to me anymore. And in a world where literally you can open up YouTube or Google and search anything and have infinite content for the rest of your life and never pay $1 for it, but you might have to watch an ad or two. To me, that's such a fascinating approach to thing. And Vince built it. If he wants to have whatever happened weekly on that show, it's his business. And my job, it was the Paul Heyman, just one more volley. I would speak my mind, have a discussion, but when he would say, no, this is what we're doing, okay, I spoke my mind. It's his dollar. That's what I said. When you work for somebody else's dollar, that's all you can do. It's ultimately his choice on what happens, and I think it's so I think it's really just I respect him so much because he built it. And I remember having a breakfast with him. It was in Edmonton, and it was just him and I, and he told me about all the businesses he had prior that failed. The construction business, he sold Dixie cups, to Dairy Queens for a while, and, what he went through. And I understand how hard he fought to keep it, because think about it. He's fought now, this is his 3rd war, and, he's worked his whole life for this. This is his legacy. He is trying to be the Walt Disney of pro wrestling. And he's done so much more. And, I don't think his final act has been written yet.
Yeah. Well, XFL's coming back too. I remember Ico Pro and and the WBF. But you're right. I mean, he's built it, and he's still.
He's done so much to create so many different, and he's tried it, and he's tried movies, he's tried this, and if you don't take chances, you never know. And I've walked in his shoes and seen how much work he's done. I mean, he used to we would finish meetings, he'd go to the gym from 7 to 9, and then he'd be in the office working until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. You're not going to outwork him. And I've seen people criticize him. Well, show me your business. I know how hard I work on this business. I work on this business 9 days a week, and I've yet to find those extra 2 days that I should work.
That you need.
It's this is a business that you run is a 9-day-a-week business, and you have to find the time, to make it work if you really want it. If you want to work for somebody else, there are plenty of people that will hire you to do many jobs that you may not enjoy. So that's how we approach it.
Yeah. So you get in what, 99, late 99?
I got in. I started there February of 2002. So that's
okay.
When
I thought it was really that.
Brian Gewirtz got in I think he started in 99, and then Ed Koski, who's still there, got in 2000. So we're the three old men of the group. So.
And you got hired by Stephanie.
Yes. So the day that Bob Patterson was canceled, it's funny is one of my favorite movies ever is Back to the Future. And on that week of the show, Biff Tannen, I don't know his real name, was on the show. And I just remember, like, we didn't even get to do the show. And I'm just like, oh, but Biff from Back to the Future was on the show. Right. And so anyway, so I come home, and that day, it's like the weird karma of life. That day in my mailbox is a letter from Jen Unick, who was Stephanie's assistant, asking me to – yeah, it's a letter, literally a letter to submit, writing samples within 2 weeks. So I write my writing samples, I send them in, and I don't hear anything for a month. Actually, I don't hear anything for 2 months. And then, like, I remember I had moved on to a home interior design show called the Christopher Lowell Show that I think was on TLC. I don't remember. And I remember having to do a phone interview with Stephanie, and she liked my phone interview, and I flew to Stanford the next week. I flew to Stanford on a Tuesday. I was there Tuesday, Wednesday. I got hired on a Thursday, and I was told to be in Milwaukee on Sunday. Literally, I had 2 days to uproot my life for a 3-month trial, and I was there 6 years. And so, yeah, wow. I remember meeting Stephanie, and I understand her charisma, and she used to get a really bad rap, but, she knows how to talk to people, and she's a real good judge of character, and I loved working for her. Did we disagree? Yes. Everyone always disagrees in every job. No one will ever get along all the time. But, she was such a really good boss. And, she was very good to me personally on a few situations that she didn't have to. And she has a lot of her mother, and obviously you spend time with Linda. She is equal parts her father and her mother. And, she understands how to make you feel like the most important person in that conversation you're having. And, I really, I will always thank her for that. And I have not spoken to her since 2008. But I'll never have a bad word to say about her because she gave me what is ostensibly one of the biggest breaks of my life. And she was always very supportive, and wanted me to be better in my job. And I was 25 or 26. And then I was the head writer of SmackDown at 27. I wasn't ready for that. I got thrown in the deep end. And like you said, when you got there, it wasn't, you weren't ready for that. They get you ready. And I'm really happy with my time there.
And you mentioned Stephanie, and I did work with Linda a lot. She was very involved in the company then. Yeah. But the kids used to come over and Stephanie and Shane, and no knock on Shane, but I just remember thinking, even when she was, in high school at the time, I'm like, this kid's sharp, Yeah. I could see her work with Dad,
Yeah.
She certainly has proven that.
She's I see someday that like her mother, she'll run for political office someday. Yeah. She is, I think she's 2 or 3 years younger than I am. So she's her very early 40s, a mother, I think, of 3 daughters, and, has worked in successful businesses, and, she's a great brand ambassador, and she's a very unique human. And, like I said, Vince's final act hasn't been written. She's just about to start whatever the next journey of her life would be. She's still in WWE. I'm not saying she's leaving the company, but she obviously has the skill set to do a lot in this world.
Well, we'll see if Vince ever steps down, which I think he's gonna die at an arena somewhere. But we'll see what happens. Yeah. But what was the writing staff like back then? I mean, how many writers did they have? How did it work?
So when I got there in 2002, the team at the time was, and it was one team when I first got there. It was Paul Heyman, Michael Hayes, Bruce Pritchard, Brian Gewirtz, who was and you might have met Brian. Brian was there for a long time. So Brian Gewirtz, Ed Koskey, and I think that was it. And then me. Like, that was the whole team was like 7 people. And, Bruce and Michael Hayes and Paul Heyman weren't technically writers. They were personalities and they were producers. But, the lion's share of the writing was between Ed Koskey, Brian Gewirtz, and I. And Ed is the ultimate survivor. He's been on creative in WWE since 2000. Like 20, so he's I think he's the head of SmackDown now, but I mean he has done yeoman's work, because I was there 6 years, and by year 5 I was like, I think I'm done with this. It's really hard and taxing.
Yeah, wears you out.
Yeah, and Vince, 2002 was a really sort of chaotic year in WWE, because Steve Austin walks out, The Rock leaves full time and never comes back full time. Yeah. The brand splits, a lot of Hogan comes back and then leaves again. A lot happened like that. If they ever do a 30 for 30 on 2002, it's really a fascinating, HLA happened then, Brock Lesnar's ascent. There's so much that happened in 2002. Cena debuts, Randy Orton, Batista. The modern era of that company was genesis in that year, but it was also very chaotic. And Shawn Michaels comes back. There was so much that happened. It's kind of my most favorite year in wrestling, and I was literally at ground zero of it, as it happened.
Yeah, and it really was coming off that gigantic peak of winning the Monday Night Wars and then being back on top again, and then it was like this kind of a crash of what's next now. It's like another era is starting. But it's interesting though to think back then, and I don't know. When they say writers, I mean, did you literally write bits? What was really the definition of a writer there? Because a lot of times, it's a producer,
Yeah. So the form. It's interesting because the format they have now, I actually just saw one recently. It's very similar, and it's evolved over the 20 years that's basically been since then. Yeah. The format would have basically what the vignette would be. So I wrote a lot of vignettes, and a lot of different elements that really kind of different shows. So sometimes you would write what would be an in-ring, a backstage segment, and the thing that a lot of people didn't realize you had to do, if you were so if I wrote a segment, I had to basically at TV, write it out in a more long form, and then you have to go in and pitch Vince, and you have to literally he wouldn't read it. He'd want you to kind of read it to him. And so because you're going to have to produce the talent. So he would want to know, all right, how are you going to have him say this? And it was really interesting because a lot of people were like, why is he doing that? He wanted to see how you would handle, because he's produced talent for all these years and you're representing his vision. So your job is to make sure that what he wants comes across the screen. And boy, did you not want that. Please come to Gorilla. Vince wants to see you after something aired, because it was never good. God.
No, it was right.
And Bruce
wasn't to say, hey, that's great, pal.
Yeah, compliments never came in the form of, please come to Gorilla right now. That would never happen. So, he might tell you after, or I love that thing. I did this one shot with Brock Lesnar once, and it was more done out of necessity, where it had to be live. The lighting guy kind of was late, and so I was like, well, there's a shadow on the wall, so let's have Brock throw a shadow, and then he'll walk here, and it'll look good. And we literally we had a minute to get it right, and we got it right. It happened, and I in the post show meeting, he's like, "Who did that shot?" I'm like, "Oh God, he's like, I fucking love it. It was great." Oh, thank God.
But you never knew, right? You never knew.
Vince would say, "God damn it," and you never knew if it was good or bad. It would be, "God damn it."
God damn, pal.
And then, God damn it, it was you never knew what the God damn it meant. Yeah. So you would wait, you would go, you would kind of tense up, going, "Oh God, he's gonna yell." He would like it's like, well, wait, what happened? So it's really he's a fascinating character, and if you haven't spent more than an hour with him, you really don't know the onion that is Vince McMahon.
But did you know times did you say, I know he's gonna like this, or was it always I have no idea, let's just see?
You never knew based on the day and honestly the environment to which you pitched it. So, for example, if it was he and I alone, which is very rare, I think it was probably 1 out of 100. But if he's great to collaborate, like that story you shared, like him pulling you aside, he understood in that moment what you needed. But sometimes if you're in a giant room, then Law of the Jungle and a different Vince comes out.
Yeah.
Because you like, so it's really.
Yeah, he could humiliate you at the same time. Yeah.
I once remember sitting in a chair where I kind of was like a folding chair, and I kind of pushed back a little bit so like the front 2 legs weren't on. He grabbed my knee, pushed it down, and said, "Sit like a man." Okay, sure, no problem. 1 minute later, guess what he did? He leaned back in his chair exactly how I was doing it.
And you did the same thing to him, right?
I missed that opportunity, but it's. So I also don't know if he was effing with me or like whatever, but like that's just who he is, and it's all, it's
like the sneezing.
Yeah,
it's the same. But I remember we were at a production meeting one time. I was like sitting next to him, and I was kind of drumming my fingers, and and he like reaches over and puts his hand on top of mine, and as he's talking, and I'm like, what the hell? Like. Just sitting there like, well, what did I do? I mean, he had those little things. He had no idea. Or he'd be in the middle of a meeting. He pulls out the arm razor thing that he would shave the hair on his arms. You're like, yeah, he has a lot of quirks.
He used to have an electric shaver that he would shave with in meetings too. So yeah, it was just, it's, and his backstory, there's for what he went through, growing up and all this stuff, and to go from living in a trailer in North Carolina with his mother, to being a billionaire, it's like what a fascinating story, and to not give up, and to to know that if he missed one payment to his father on when he bought the company, that the company would revert back to like the risks he's taken, like you have to respect that. Because when you put your money where the mouth is, and he really has proven what a way to really build a business. And all of us, as much as everybody has their opinions on him, the genre would not be where it is if he didn't do what he did.
Yeah, well, like with WrestleMania 1, I mean, if that didn't go, we're not talking. He put everything on the line and did it more than once. Now, the thing that is interesting for me, though, from where I came from and when I was with that company, from 87 to 93, is that, you never heard of writers ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, the writers didn't, it was Pat and Bruce and Vince at his poolside, and that's the way it worked. Or the guys came up with their own storylines. They pitched them, and it was just a different world, back then. And I remember that, and you probably have no idea who these people were, but Emily Feinberg was one of Vince's assistants at one point, and her husband, Michael Feinberg, was an advertising guy, and he came into the company, and he was like the first guy. I was thinking about it today, that he was the first person that was from the outside, wasn't from the wrestling world, who Vince brought in. And at that time, like when I came in, there was this collision of the two worlds. It was the old school, you had the old generation of wrestlers you had, and Vince realizing, if I'm going to take this product to the next level, production-wise, I've got to bring people in from the networks or outside. It can't be these guys who came from wrestling. It's just not going to happen. So there was this big collision, and that was like one of the last things, at least when I was there, you started to see change. But that did not go over easy at all. But Michael was very talented, and he did some good stuff. He did a lot of the vignettes, but it was, I don't know if he ever got any credit for it, but he was like one of the first writers to come in. So when people talk about the writers today, and I think they have this vision, and you've talked about it before, that, it's these idiot writers who have know nothing about wrestling, and they come in from Hollywood and they're used to doing, sitcoms and think it's going to work with wrestling. Was that true then, and did you see it happening? And how much did these guys know about wrestling they were bringing in?
So different people would come in with different skill sets, and they would bring like this guy named Tom Cheehawk. He was brought in to oversee the writing staff, and he knew very little about wrestling. I think he wrote on Alice, and he had managed some. It was so strange, and he was out of his depths, and it's funny to watch Elon Musk talk, And if Elon Musk was a writer, Vince wouldn't have liked him based on how he speaks in his presentation. He's not a Vince. Like, Vince would just, like, oh, get to the point already, Elon. Like, it would have been, he wouldn't have
Go build a damn car. I don't care.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, this guy just talking about this. It's just like, Vince has certain things that, like, picadillos, and guess what? It's his company. If he wants to hire this person to try something, but he works very well off of, you know, the famous thing of, like, people talk about, like, they'd pitch an idea to Vince, he'd say no, and then 3 weeks later it would be his idea with, like, one small tweak. And he can do whatever he wants, and, you know, it's his way or the highway there. And, you know, a lot of people come and go. I mean, I think Bruce has been hired and fired like 4 times. And, you know, you know, like, the fact that Jeff Jarrett's back there is such a, like, it shows that Vince is willing to work with anybody. And, you know, the fact that they bring people back, the fact that Hogan came back after he testified against him, you know, like Vince understands that there's a difference between personal feelings and business feelings. Yeah. And he's like, I hope you like the taste of shit, because you're going to eat a lot of it. And it's a great allegory. I think that some reasons
some cases he brought people back just so he could make them eat that.
And you know what? It's your choice, you know. And it's interesting. The people that tell him no sometimes get further than the people that always say yes.
Yeah. But that was always a fine line too. People would say, Vince just wants you to stand up to him. And then you see the guys, you know, getting in a cab out front. You know, you just had to know how to talk to him. And it didn't necessarily mean standing up to him. Yeah.
But there was a guy that replaced me that would argue with him. And I said, $1 worth of advice. I've done this job for 4 years. Yeah. He's not going to want you to argue about C-level stuff like this, because you're just wasting his time. I understand you think it's important, but you got to know what hill to die on. And I think that was a real lesson I learned from him as well.
Yeah. And after he shortly left after that period of time, did you ever stay in touch? Because sure he didn't. But
the writer, no. It's funny is like every year, like on his birthday, I'll send him a happy birthday email, Vince. And sometimes he'll write back, and sometimes he doesn't. And when Billy and I left Impact and we decided to start our thing, I sent some thank you emails to a bunch of people that I worked with, and I still have the picture to this day. Like, I had 4 people in a row in my email, and one was my buddy that was just a random normal person that wrote back, and then in this order it went Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff, and Vince McMahon, and and it's just like, he's like, glad you're doing well, good for you, and that's great. And I've never called and asked him for a job. I've never written and asked for a job. You know, I will always forever thank him for what he did. Not only as a fan, like, he can do whatever he wants. It's his company. And I understand, you know, can you criticize what's there? Possibly, but that's possible in every world. You know, so, you know, he has done so much for all of us in so many ways that he gets a little carte blanche, and obviously he can decide what he wants. And again, whatever happens is in his control.
So why do you think it got to that point, though, where they started bringing in a lot of people? And at one point, I mean, I think they had a lot of writers.
Yeah, I think that the peak was like 26 to 50 between like a home team. When I was there, the most we ever had, I think the team was 10, maybe 12. Like, that was the biggest it was ever. And we had split the team. So when I managed SmackDown, I had like 4 or 5 guys that worked for me. And then Raw had 6 people. So, you know, it was... I think the company grew, and I was there. What is the period they don't talk about? Like 2002 to 2006, they never speak fondly of. It's never they never wax romantically about Mark Jindrak managed by Teddy Long. It's never something that gets brought up in documentaries. But the company went, you know, it was pre-PG and post-Attitude Era, and so like it's really a fascinating time. You know, I mean, obviously a lot of bad stuff happened in that period with Eddie Guerrero's passing, the Benoit story. Yeah. You know, there was a lot of negative publicity on the company, and, you know, it was not sunshine and rosy days. You know, like it's really, I think, his greatest accomplishment, what he did with no competition to get the company to where it was basically when they went on Fox. You know, they took the company. I remember when I got there, the stock was $9. I remember getting options at $9, and I remember feeling so good to sell them at $17. And now see the stock.
Wish you would have held on, yeah.
Well, and the stock ended up peaking at, I think it was like $99.
Yeah.
He does not get, like, people don't give him enough credit to lead a company from $9 to $99 on the stock market. And you can argue with his creative, but he's building a real business. And, it's a legacy business now. It is the Disney of wrestling. It's the gold standard. And again, you don't have to like it but you do have to respect what he did with it.
Yeah. Now, and during that period, you say they don't like to really acknowledge it, but what are you most proud of that you worked on there? I know you did a lot with Cena, and that was kind of the rise of John then. But
Yep.
what when you look back, what do you look back most fondly being involved with storylines that during that period?
So my job was to manage SmackDown. So he was actually a lot more patient with SmackDown on a lot of ways than he was with Raw. So, like, John Cena is a perfect example. Like, we brought John in, and, John used to talk about Johnny Boots and Tights. He was a guy with different colored boots and tights every week. But, when he did this Halloween rap, when we were in the UK, and I've heard 16 people take credit for who heard it and where they put it on. But what got John over in that character was the consistency. And every week I would pit in the show, John does a rap on X, John does a rap on Y, and I would tell John, hey, here's who you're working, here's some ideas, and he would go off and write it, and he would just do it. And for the first 6 months he would do it, and Vince would just let him do it. And then, like, I remember he crossed the line on one line. I remember John was the first person to ever mention the XFL in a negative tone in that company, and it was 2003, and the pain was still fresh. It was actually WrestleMania. He did it on the Heat, and I remember this goes to the Vince would like to see you. So that WrestleMania, which was at Safeco Field or whatever, the Seattle Stadium. So Gorilla was in either center field or right field, and Vince's office was on third base. And so it was a 20-minute walk to Vince's office, and there he is. He's wrestling that night, and he's fucking jacked up. He's in his his black pants and his wife beater. And he goes, what the hell was that XFL line? And he goes, from now on, I need to know everything he's going to say. No problem. I took it on the chin, and, I went back to John, and he goes, okay. And we learned, and, it like that kind of process to let John ascend, but also in that same period, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio and a lot of guys, just being able to help facilitate and a lot of this job is shepherding. It's the same what I've done with Nick. Nick is wholly talented in a large part of this process, but we all need producers. We all need somebody to say yes or no or try it this way. Yeah. And, it's one of the things I'm proudest of is coming up with, the ability to take a talent like Nick, who when he took the chance on us and vice versa, he was out of the business. He had decided, well, maybe this isn't for me because I don't fit. And, so just like with Cena, to give Nick this opportunity, and he's made it his own, and he's as much an author in this and the NWA story as anybody else.
Wow. As far part of this journey, really, and as of late, it's been that union with Billy. And how did that all start? I know besides the fact he was a huge wrestling fan, but how did that start with you guys?
So Billy, has been a wrestling fan. Famously, Paul Heyman wanted him to invest $1 million in ECW for 10%, I think, in 2000, and he turned it down because he didn't get any kind of creative input. Billy or Heyman just wanted his money, and so I met Billy sometime in the mid 2000s, and we kind of always stayed in touch. So when he came to Impact in I think 2014 or 15, I don't remember the exact year, he remembered me, and, we have obviously always clicked well creatively and personally, so that when things started to crater and impact, and he saw what he calls it Game of Thrones. When the Game of Thrones happened at Impact, we became allies, and I just basically said to him, I'm with you. Whatever happens in this, like, I don't want to be here if it's not with you, and because I kind of knew a little bit about the people, the players, and once you pick a side in a Game of Thrones situation, you are marked. So when we didn't end up with the company, I knew it was not going to go well. And I was told, and it's not even anybody that ended up with a piece of the company. I was told I was on a list. And I remember talking to, I think it was Ed Nordholm who ran the company. I said, I heard him on some list. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, this person is telling these three people that me, this talent, because we sided with Billy, are going to be marginalized. I said, and it's one of the reasons I'm deciding to leave is because if this is who you're aligned with, I'm just not interested. I said, I've done nothing wrong except protect my friend's interest, who, by the way, paid $1.8 million to keep everyone employed while Dixie had cratered the company. You know, my loyalty is to whoever's paying me. And at that time, Billy was, with no guarantee. And, you know, so that's where we kind of bonded. And then we really dove into doing this. Like, I made 30 documentaries with him in 30 days.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, that was really eye-opening because I wanted to prove to him, look what we can do quickly. And great, we'll have more quality, but the world moves at that pace where we're recording this podcast. It'll probably go up within a day. And so, like, it's in the old days, you would produce it, you'd edit it. It would take, you know, a week, months to produce something come out. Everything moves so fast that we aligned on it. And he's built, you know, he was one of the first people to say this streaming thing is going to be a lot bigger than people said it. He said it in 1999 for music. And, you know, he's been always ahead of the curve on this. And that's what our point with Power is, okay, yes, being on television would be great, but there's a barrier of entry and a cost to it. How do we do the same thing at a cost that's acceptable? And, you know, for him to take a risk, and he's using his own personal money. It's not my money. It's my time. But that's why I kind of always defer to him on what vision he wants, because he's the one funding it, but I want to make sure that it's exactly what the market's there. And we talk about it a lot. And, you know, we communicate all day, and it's, you know, I'll get a message here. He'll call me this time. We'll talk about this thing. We'll try this. And it's probably the best work environment I've ever had in my life.
You know, in all the organizations you work through, and it's, you know, some of them not the best experiences, and you have this deep down love for wrestling, but did it dim it? And I mean, were there times you're saying, like, I've just got to get out of this business? And like we said before, Godfather 3, you know, they pulled you back in. I mean, why do that?
So after the Impact, I hate to use the word debacle because I did enjoy a lot of what I did creatively, but as far as a business thing, it was a debacle. 2016, that 2002 WWE and 2016 TNA are probably the two best stories that have never really been fully told. Okay. But, you know, leaving, you know, Billy and I, when we were on the 30 days trip, I remember we were literally on the border of Mexico, and for about 12 seconds, Billy wandered into Mexico by mistake. And he came back, and we were sitting there talking, and I was like, what do we really like about wrestling? What is it? And that conversation, and that's why we don't make bad deals. We don't get ourselves, you know, we didn't sell we had an offer to sell half the company 2 weeks in after we bought it. And we decided we haven't done anything yet. You know, like it's hard to turn down millions and millions and millions of dollars, but our story is about what this is. And that's like, he wanted to, and I was all on board, even if I was going to take less money, give up a lot more time, and do 70% of what I'm doing is nothing I've ever done before in this job. It's like doing talent negotiations, editing, shooting, but it allows me to be able to get the process right so that when we expand, I know where all the holes are. So when someone goes, oh, we'll do it this way. No, you want to be lazy and you want to do it that way. No, we're not doing it that way. So it allows us to have real sort of institutional control, which is a term he's used a lot, because if you don't have institutional control, then you're always sort of fighting uphill against somebody's wants and desires based on what they're looking to get out of the experience.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like that's the way you plan to keep this, that you're not going to have anybody telling you guys what to do or compromising what you can do. And, you know, it sounds like a successful formula, at least for your own selves.
Well, it allows talents to know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
They know where the buck stops. And they also know that we're not, you know, none of us are getting rich in this environment right now. It's simply it's very much a passion project, but talents for probably since the dawn of wrestling time, have been told A and then they get B. But when I tell someone A, they're getting A. And, that level of communication has not existed. And, it really kind of is important to people to take a chance. And we're very genuine and very authentic. And I'm not going to carny you that, man, we got some big things coming. No, we're going to figure this out because that's the way the world is. And I can rattle off 20 YouTubers that are more famous than Brad Pitt right now as far as in the market, as far as, connecting with an audience and understanding how 2019, 2020 media works.
Yeah. Well, and as part of this that you feel that you're blazing a new trail in some ways of, whatever the product is, but you guys are doing things that others aren't, and it's the future. You see what's ahead.
Yeah, it's like the podcast movement. I had a podcast in 2011. I did it for 9 months. And once a week, somebody brings it up to me, when are you going to bring that podcast back? I wouldn't do it because there are so many now. But there's only, between AEW and us, there's only 2 original YouTube shows, wrestling-wise, in the market. And, that's why they pair together so well, because there is a desire by the audience to watch original content in that world. And where we go next, who knows? Maybe there's a platform called TikTok that we might say, hey, we're going to do the first wrestling TikTok show, which is basically where it's like a lip sync video creation tool that I haven't even fully. Billy and I met with them in 2016 when they were, I think it was called Musical.ly at the time, but there's these new things, and guess what? That's where young viewers are. They're not watching cable television. They're not watching cable television every night. It's just not. It's not what they grew up with, and it's for us. It's a very unique way to kind of create. And he's believing in a vision that we've come up with together. Or I'll say, hey, I want to try this documentary series. Okay, great. Just keep the costs manageable, and we'll go from there. So it's been really fun, and I don't know what the end game is. I don't know what the finish line looks like, but so it's a hell of a run between now and then.
Yeah, and I would say as creative people, it must be just awesome.
Yeah.
Really, this has been awesome talking to you, Dave. I got some questions from people. They found out that you were going to be coming on, so if I can throw a few at you, and then I'll let you go. But Jared England wants to know, I love watching the new NWA Power show. Any possibility of making the show 2 hours long instead of just the 1 hour on Tuesdays?
No. It never overstays its welcome. So if it becomes 2 hours, then it's double the work. We like it. Now, that to be said, we are going to create a secondary series that will be in the same flavor but in a different package. And 10 pound, there will always be some kind of content we're creating, but we don't want to do more of the same. We want to do better of this. We want what we're doing now just to get better, and then if it expands, yes, but we want to keep pushing the envelope instead of making more envelopes.
And a follow-up on this is also any plans for a 24-hour NWA wrestling channel similar to what the WWE Network is. And I don't know, did the purchase come with the library?
So we have a license on the Paul Bosch Houston Library. So it's no secret that a streaming service cannot be built on one library alone. It's why we haven't done a lot with it. It honestly, that library probably deserves to be with WWE, but our time right now is to be custodians of it and hopefully keep it in moving forward and a value by using clips when it makes sense. But no, a 24-hour network is nothing we're interested in. We want to do quality, not quantity.
Sean Daniel says, what is the process of submitting a storyline in the WWE or any company? I think Sean's looking for work, but what is the process, though, when you had an idea for something to run?
So every week, we would come home from TV on a Wednesday. I knew I had to pitch SmackDown to Vince on a Friday. So when I first got there, the pitch process was, Brian and whoever would pitch what were the 10 segments. It wasn't a written show. So I looked at it and went, okay, so that's how it's done. So one week I wrote a whole show, and Vince was like, what's this? It's a whole show. He goes, why would you do that? I said, pitching you just 10 ideas and you pick and choose, I'd rather you look at, here's my complete thoughts on what this show can look like. And it just kind of was just a different approach. it pushed forward kind of how the show was written, because guess what? You wouldn't go to a show table read with 10 ideas. You had to have a script. So, the process was always, get Vince to sign off on a concept, a story idea, multiple week story idea. And, it vacillated from week to week. So there was never a single do A to B to C there.
Yeah. And, do you guys have writers? How do you guys do your creative process?
It's, Billy's in charge of the overall narrative. My job, I guess I play Kevin Dunn is the best way for me to describe what I do. Sort of, I'm in charge of visuals, the vibe. I also do talent relations. Billy's 100% in charge of creative. I'm obviously there to consult and give my thoughts on what he wants to do. And that's basically like Nick gets some input. Talents all have inputs in their stories based upon what Billy wants to do. And then they have the creative freedom to tell that story in their own unique voice. It's sort of our process.
Okay, Mario Ballantyne says, for someone who's never watched an episode yet, but is aware of the history of the NWA, what makes this incarnation different and stand out?
It's in the spirit of what a Lou Thez, a Dusty Rhodes, a Ric Flair, even promoters like Paul Bosch and Sam Mushnick. There is a legitimacy to this brand that, it's fascinating to read the history. In the 50s, the National Wrestling Alliance was investigated by the FBI for collusion, and it's like, what? Like when you hear names like Thez and Mushnick and Flair and Rhodes, and then you hear Corgan and Lagana, it's just like, especially as old school fans, it's insane. And the ability to take something that used to be one way, used to be all these promoters and all this stuff, and to reinvent it but make it still be familiar. It's you don't need to know anything about the history of the NWA to watch this show, but it's almost like an Easter egg that if you want to dive down that hole, you're like, wow, that looks like the old studio, and wow, that guy reminds me of Ric Flair, and oh, that guy reminds me a little bit of that guy. And it's the energy and spirit. And I spent a lot of time with Dusty, which I'm sure you did too. And Dusty was a walking, living American dream gimmick. That was who he was on TV, was who he carried himself in real life to be. And that's what we want. We want to bring that back, where these larger than life personalities, who they are on television is a lot closer to who they are in the real world.
Yeah, and to finish up, the last question from Aiden Yastro says, how important was it for you guys to match the original NWA studio? Has the camera crew or stage crew moved things on the set slightly to the left or right to just help replicate things more?
So we the studio is touches of Memphis, the Gordon Soley, Georgia Championship Wrestling. There's a little touch of everything. The flags, but we added color to the curtains. It's our take on it, with an homage to the past. And, but like, for example, two of the camera guys shot WCW back in the day. So we had people that had actually shot wrestling in the 90s, for Turner back in the day. So it was like they knew what they were doing. Some of the camera guys had no idea. This guy just loved close-ups. It's just like, that doesn't work. But there's I've put a couple in because, hey, you caught Impact on like a big move. Great. It's like we're kind of rediscovering how this was all done. And, we're making it our own while also making it familiar.
Yeah, fantastic. And, I do. It's just fun to watch. I really enjoy the interviews when, they do it. It's just like the throwback with the interview, and then they're yelling at the crowd, and it's fun to watch. Remind everybody again when they can catch it on YouTube.
Yeah. So it's every Tuesday at 6:05 Eastern. I think that's 12 o'clock Hawaiian. I was trying to figure out.
I know 3 o'clock here, so 3 o'clock Pacific.
West Coast. Yeah. So, but the good part is, if you go and subscribe to the channel, if you just search NWA Power, you can find it. They're all episodes are numbered. There's a playlist. Yeah. You can, and we've got clips everywhere that will lead you to the episodes. You just search NWA Power with 3 R's and you'll find it, and 1 R you'll also find it. So. And
what about getting in touch with you? Twitter?
I'm at Lagana and on Twitter and Instagram. Don't add me on Facebook. People don't I literally on the top of my Facebook. It's for friends and family only. No wrestling bookings. and every day I get about 20 people trying to get booked. So that's the fastest way to never get booked. So.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I'm glad we had a chance to get together again here. I had a blast when we did get to do that interview. I would love to have done more, but I've got another job that they've invited me back to do StarCast, and I just haven't been able to get away. But it's just so much fun, and I really love to see what you guys are doing, because I think we're going to look back and see what you're doing now and what it grows into. It's the future of sports entertainment.
I'd love for at some point you to come down and hang out. Hell, maybe even Sean Mooney comes out and cuts a promo at the podium where we see the other side of Sean Mooney where he just snaps. Like, I've had enough of holding the microphone. I'm sure you have that side somewhere. So.
Oh yeah. You remember when Ian came out and they just never let him loose, but
of course.
It's never gotten over that. All right, Dave Lagana, thank you so much for coming on Primetime.
Thank you, Tom.